Hi guys, welcome back. Today we are going to take a look at JSON. JSON is basically JavaScript object notation. It's a data representational format. So it's commonly used for APIs. So what this means is that, let's say if you create a backend API or if you have a backend application and a front-end application and you want to share data between them, you will use JSON data, right? And if you have different applications, let's say two completely independent different applications, and you want to share data between them, you will be using JSON objects. It's a commonly accepted and recognized format to share data between APIs and between different applications, right? Or two different modules of a single application, right? So if you have so basically JSON is supported by multiple languages, and JavaScript supports this natively. Since we're learning JavaScript, so we don't have to do anything extra to use JSON. And but with other languages, you have to use serializer and deserializer libraries sometimes. And it supports strings, numbers, booleans, null, arrays, and obviously objects, because it's a JavaScript object notation, right? So what JSON says is that you can pass data between different APIs, but using objects. So you create it into a standard structure called as a JavaScript JSON object, right? And then you can pass data between them. And so let me first show you what an example of a JSON object looks like, right? So you remember that a regular object, a regular JavaScript object, this is what it looks like. Let's say if you have first name, and then you'll have John, and then you'll have last name, and then you have Do. Now JSON is very similar to this. All you have to do is you have to put even the keys. As you know, these are keys, right? This is key, this is another key, and these are the values of those keys, right? So if you don't know about this, you can look at one of my previous videos where I go over all the JavaScript object methods and advanced object details. You'll come to know properly how you can access keys and values, and what are keys and what are values, basically. So these are the keys and these are the values. So usually in JavaScript objects, the keys are not covered in these double inverted commas, but with JSON you have to do that. So how would you know what is a JSON object and what is a JavaScript object? So you can go to something like JSON lint or any JSON validator. You can just paste your object there, and you can validate your JSON. It says valid JSON, right? So this is a valid JSON, and that's how you would come to know. Now let me show you a little more complex JSON object, because this kind of a simple object is something that you won't be using. You'll be using more complex objects like this, for example. So let's say there we have an array called employees, and this is not just an array, but this is an array of objects, which is something they'll be using. You will be using on a very regular basis if you use something like React or Node.js, right? And so you have first name here, and then you'll write the first name, which is John, and then you have last name, which is Doe, and then let's just copy these. Let's just change the names quickly. We'll say Anna and Smith and Peter Jones. Okay, now let's validate it and see what happens. It says it's a valid JSON. That's what even formatted it out for us. So this is something that you'll be using very commonly. This is an array of objects inside an object, which is the JSON object, right? Now let me show you how to convert a regular JavaScript object into a JSON object. Otherwise you'll have to manually come and put all these double inverted commas, right, everywhere. Instead of that, it's very easy to change a JavaScript object into a JSON object. So let me first output this out and see what happens, and then let me create a variable called my string JSON dot stringify. Stringify is the function or the JSON method that we'll use to convert this object. Sorry, it's just object, it's not my object. And we'll say console.log my string. Let's see what happens now. right? So this is the console that JSfield gives us. You can see this is the OBJ object, which has John and Doe, right? And this is the MyString object, which is a JSON object. But since this is a front-end platform, JSfield is a front-end platform, it's very difficult to it's finding it very difficult to display a JSON object properly, right? So no issues. So now we have now I've shown you how to convert a JavaScript object into a JSON object. Now let me show you one more thing, how to convert a date into JSON object. So let's say var n is equal to d dot toJSON. ToJSON is another function that you can use to convert anything into, or especially dates, into JavaScript JSON objects. So let me show you console.log. I'll say n. What you get here is a JSON object, but it's actually date, right? So I hope that makes sense. I hope you've learned a little bit about how JSON objects work, and we'll be using these very often in our future videos. So I just want to share with you how JSON works, right? In case you don't have a programming background and you've never used JSON before. So thanks a lot for watching. If you're liking these videos, then do subscribe, and thank you.